Yeah, my name is Miguel Quezada. Yeah, so I paroled July 2nd of 2018, right? So I haven't been out that long. This July will be my 2 years out. I served 20 years in prison, various prisons throughout California, including doing some productive time with my friend here, Key, when we were both in San Quentin. Started off in 1998, juvenile hall. I was a juvenile offender, to use that terminology. I was tried as an adult under what is Proposition 21 at the time, meaning that I could get sentenced. I tried as an adult in an adult court, um, even though I was under the age of 18, and eventually I was convicted and then sentenced to 45 years to life, right? So my initial parole board hearing, which is in California Departments of Corrections, the Board of Prison Hearings wasn't scheduled until 2040. So I was one of those that fell into the category of having no value, no irredeemable factors. They actually use that language, and a lot of the case law saying this, we don't have we're incorrigible. In other words, we're static, like we're never going to change. No matter what happens, no matter what type of services are provided to us, it's we should just deserve to be in prison for the rest of our life. Obviously, that's changed thanks to organizations that have mobilized, but to do that and advocate for us, and students and professors and a lot of people that advocated for us. But yeah, I ended up when I was in prison, I was doing many things. Me and Key Lam were part of a juvenile lifer group called Kitty Cat, where I met Julia. We were doing a lot of advocacy work at the time. We were working with like Human Rights Watch and Elizabeth Calvin and a lot of other great people and a lot of other great guys that were on the inside also. And so we managed to work on Senate Bill 260, which eventually got me out, which said that somebody that was under the age of 18 when they committed their crime and were sentenced to life has some sort of recourse to go to the parole board earlier. And so that eventually passed and was signed by the governor in 2013. And so that benefited me. And I think that got me my start around getting into, organizing and policy. And being able to do that, I started working also in the newspaper in San Quentin News as a staff writer and eventually managing editor. And a lot of what we wrote about was everything we wrote about was criminal justice, the positive stories, highlighting, again, narratives that were at the time a little contradictory to what a lot of people thought about the people that were incarcerated. So that was just, highlighting the positive groups, the graduations, the self-help programs that were created by other people, issues that were pertaining to us around laws and policies that were changing at the time, like 3 strikes. Those were huge things that ended up allowing a lot of more people to get out that ordinarily, and in the political situation had to change, would still be in prison, like me and Key Lam. Since I've been out, I was able to, I was working at Communities United for Restorative Justice up until like 2 weeks ago. So I was doing policy work, advocating, going to Sacramento, but we're also doing, besides state policy, we were organizing around a national network called Formerly Incarcerated and Convicted Peoples and Family Movement, which is a long acronym. But we were doing, it's 50 organizations, and I'm still associated with them, 50 organizations across the state. And it's just not focusing around, one single issue around incarceration. It's focusing around formerly incarcerated women leadership, and transgender issues for people that deal with incarceration across pretty much. There's organizations in Boston, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi. There's like 5-6 different organizations in New York, as part of the same coalition. It's been a journey to be able to do this work and being able to be in a position where we could actually give voice to the issues like that pertain to my experiences in life, having been through the court system, through the juvenile system, through the adult system, and understanding what that means. I think in a more personal level, um, and being able to share that experiences with attorneys and legislators that we work with to pass law. I think one of the most significant things that I've been a part of, I also worked on policing issues in the community. So I was able to work on Assembly Bill 392, which changed the rules of standard for use of force in California. Recently, this last year, it came into effect January 1st. It was signed by the governor. Yeah, it was a challenge to go against. I'm on parole, and I'm advocating for changing the way law enforcement operates around use of force, and so it's a particular situation I was finding myself in, going to advocate for these type of things, and but it's like in the big picture that we do, all of us, whether it's students and getting involved in the things that we're going to get involved in our career paths. It's like working together to change, like say the narratives, the way we view people in prison, because eventually that leads us to be able to view everybody in our society, whether it's people that are homeless, addicted to drugs, because it can happen to anybody at any time.
One of the things I think about is this guy. I think about this kid, right? When I do this kind of work. And I think about like, how did this kid become to this person right here? Where is that picture at? How did that kid end up to this? Right? And so I think about from that little kid to this person who this is inside when I first got to San Quentin State Prison. And I was like scared out of my mind, So I wasn't born in this country. I'm a refugee. Me and my family actually fled Vietnam when I was about 2 years old by boat. And so we were stuck in the South China Sea for 6 months without no food or water, just living off whatever rations we had left over that we brought with us, and then also rain, and then some of the folks was fishing. And so, and I remember, and then we got rescued by a fisherman, and the only way that he said he would rescue us, we gave up everything we had of value: jade, gold, anything, right? Silk, whatever we had. So we gave up everything we had, and it was a tiny little boat, probably about like 80 people on this tiny little boat, just floating in the South China Sea. When we got to Hong Kong refugee camp, where we stayed for 2 years before we actually got our visas to come to America. But I remember just coming to this country super confused about everything, because we moved around a lot. And I asked my parents, like, why do we move all the time? Like, especially when we started to settle in. And my family always tell me, like, it's none of your business. Don't mind that, right? It's grown-up stuff. So I'm like, okay, as a kid, I'm just like, as a kid, my intuition is like, okay, I'm going to trust in what they say. And not realizing anything that happened in their life, not knowing about the journey. I don't even remember the plane ride from Hong Kong refugee camp to America. I remember that we mainly lived around the Bay Area most of my life. And most of the places that we lived in was actually low income, like poverty, poor folks, just barely surviving, like my dad, my mom did all kinds of different jobs, like waitress, cooking food, washing dishes. And then I remember most of the time I was often by myself. Me and my little brother was often by ourselves, just fending for ourselves. At 6 years old, my parents decided to separate. Didn't know the reason why. I remember before the separation that my mom, the San Francisco Police Department came and arrested my dad. I found out later that my dad was physically abusive, physically, verbally, emotionally abusive toward my mom. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that, because I remember as a kid, now I reflect back, is that I often went in my room, because they always told me to go in my room, and I closed my door and I always hear screaming all the time. And and I think one of the things the way I coped with that was I drew a lot. I started drawing, got my own little fantasy world, and I also listened to a lot of loud music. Anything that would like blur out the argument. I remember after the separation of my parents that we moved into this very predominantly African-American neighborhood. I remember when we first got there, I told my mom, I said, I don't think we should be here. And she like, why? And at that time, I couldn't even speak English either. And she said, why? I said, because I could tell. Like, people are staring at us and giving us that look. I just know as a 6-year-old kid, like, we're not welcome. I remember for like a whole year, I got chased to and from school, rotten eggs thrown at me, pit bull dogs released on me, like rocks thrown at me, like all kinds of stuff, right? Like, getting pushed down the hill, all kinds of stuff. And I always told my mom always told me, like, just suck it up, I said, don't worry about it. I'm like, for me, I'm like, how can I not worry about that? Like, this is not cool. And our school is only 5-minute walk distance, but it took me about almost half an hour to get to school every day because I had to make sure that I went the long route where these other kids won't catch me. I remember one time when I was about 8 years old, they caught me. And so they surrounded me and they say, well, you have a choice. The choice is you fight one of us or you fight all of us. And so, it don't take a rocket scientist to determine what my decision was, right? So I said, okay, I'll fight. I couldn't speak English still, so I just pointed at that one guy, the one that stepped forward. And so I don't even remember the whole fight. I just remember I stood on top of him with my fist balled up, shaking, crying, and I just, and all this audio, all these people that was around me, like, I just see their mouth moving, but like there was no sound at all. I was scared out of my mind. Just thinking about it now, like I'm shaking about it. And I remember getting off of him, or getting pushed off him by somebody. And then I looked over to my right side and I see his friends coming my way. And so I'm like, oh shoot, they about to whoop me for beating up one of their friends. But instead they all like congratulate me, like, great job, man, you did a wonderful work, like, man, way to go. And then I remember the kid that beat his mom, like, how you let that little chink beat you up? Like, what, you represent our family, you represent our neighborhood. How you gonna let this foreigner just beat you up? And so it was, for me, I was like super confused, like, okay, violence is okay, but yet I was still not accepted. And I realized that to be able to fit in that neighborhood, I had to be violent, verbally, physically, especially both of those. And then the other thing is I had to be emotionally, like, numb to the whole process, right? I couldn't cry, I couldn't scream, I couldn't show no kind of weaknesses because they said, if you do, you're not one of us and you can't hang out with us. And it's like, I don't want to be left alone because I remember when I got there, I was alone and I didn't like being bullied. So I put on that mask, like everything was good, all good. And I remember as I got older, fast forward to when I got to high school, I started doing bad in school. I started dropping out, started cutting school. I actually started cutting school at 2nd grade. I know none of y'all, if y'all cut school at 2nd grade, you probably would have got, man, like whoopings, huh? And so I started cutting school at 2nd grade because I had to stay home to watch my little brother because he was being neglected, dirt, like rashes on his butt, his eye was all red, like his skin was bad. So I just decided to stay home for 1 whole year and just raise my little brother by myself. My mom didn't know about it, but when she did, she ended up putting him at a different daycare way across town. I flunked 2nd grade, so that was like depressing, after, everyone else passed, and then I got laughed at, and some kids started calling me retarded, dropout, all kinds of different names, and that hurt. In high school, it was not as good. I remember my family decided, said, we're going to move to Richmond, California. I'm like, why the hell we want to go to Richmond? Like, there's nothing over there. I don't know if any of you guys know anything about Richmond, but Richmond is really jacked up. But growing up, I grew up mainly around African-American and Samoans, but mostly African-American. I grew up very hip-hop. I used to break dance. I was a b-boy, did all that. And now when I went to Richmond, I'm like, damn, there's hella Asian people here. And I'm like, the only Asian I grew up with Chinese folks. And so coming here, I met like Lao folks, Hmong folks, Min folks. I'm like, who are? I'm like, Mom, there's hella Chinese here. And then my buddy's like, no, that we are not Chinese. But it was a culture clash for me, because not only were there a lot of Asian, but I was also introduced into the gang lifestyle. I didn't know I didn't know nothing about gangs. I remember growing up, I used to use this term like, what's up, blood? And I was just like, what's up, family? So I went to Richmond and I said, what's up, blood, to a bunch of Asian. They said, what's up, cuz? This is cuz. I'm like, and then I asked my other friend, like, we cousins? Like, I was like, I didn't know nothing. I was like so naive. And they said, they Crips. I'm like, for me, that still is foreign. Like, you might just speak French to me, right? So I'm just like, okay, like, what is that? And so they said, oh, cause we wear blue, so we're Crips. I'm like, and they wear red, they're Bloods. I'm like, so they started educating me about, the gang lifestyle. And so I was curious. So I started hearing their story, and I was like, damn, they have the same history as I have, the same migration story, the same immigration story, the same family dynamic, the same culture. Even though we speak different languages, but it was so close to each other. And I remember that, I didn't even know, by me hanging out with them, I became a target of rival gangs, their gangs. And so at 16 years old, I got jumped into a gang, to an Asian Crip gang. And at 17, I committed my crime, which landed me in prison. At 17 years old, first time ever being locked up, they said, well, because of your crime, we find you unfit to be tried as a juvenile, so we're going to try you as an adult. And so I got sentenced to 25 years to life with a 2-year gang enhancement for gang-related murder. And then I remember because I was a juvenile, I started out at juvenile hall. And then I worked my way up to California Youth Authority, and then county jail, and then prison. And then I remember when I was in juvenile hall, it was crazy. Like, there's a bunch of kids there that have, like, everybody trying to prove themselves, who's the toughest. If you didn't show any kind of weaknesses, you would become a victim. So I make sure that I wasn't the toughest, but I make sure that I wasn't showing no fear either. I did some bad things to a lot of people, just so I could survive while I was in there. I remember one time I actually had a bucket. They were bullying me in the shower, so I got mad. I went out, got a bucket of hot water, and went back in and just splashed all over that guy. And then start socking them up in the shower. And I got put into solitary confinement, but after that, like, people left me alone. Like, they said, don't mess with him, because he's not gonna back down. So one thing I learned is I went back to what I knew was violence. And the other thing is manning up. That's what they call it. And so fast forward, I went to prison. When I finally landed in San Quentin, that's where I met Miguel. And then a bunch of older guys, older lifers, they said, hey, youngster, they said, you want to go home? I say, man, since I've been locked up, when I'm in prison, the only way people went home was in a body bag, or they just died, right? So they told me that. I laughed at them, like, you guys are funny. Like, only way we leave is in a pine box or a bag. They said, no, you can actually go home. I'm like, no one's going home. And then as the year went on, a couple years went on, then I started seeing these lifers, these OGs started leaving. I'm like, and so I asked, like, where'd they go? They said they went home. I said, you could go home? They said, yeah. I said, so that got me curious, like, how do you go home? And so you have to take programming. And part of the program is you got to talk about your crime. Not only you got to talk about your crime, you got to, like, learn about why you did what you did. So you got to tap into that little kid. That's why I showed you that picture of that little kid. You got to tap back into that. Like, how did that little kid end up in prison? Because a lot of times people don't even know. They walk around, that hurt kid is still there. It hasn't healed. So they walk around with all this trauma and they're just throwing it out on people. And that's what I was doing. I was just throwing out all my trauma on other people. There's a saying that I learned. It's called hurt people hurt people. If I'm hurting, I don't want to hurt other people, thinking that oh, by me hurting other people, I'm going to get some of this hurt out. But in reality, it doesn't. It actually causes more harm in the process. And so I remember they say, hey, go to these programs, talk about your crime, talk about your life, take accountability, show remorse. And I remember the first time I went to my first hearing, as a lifer, every lifer has to go in front of a board panel, which is made up of 2 law enforcement or forming law enforcement or, somebody that has been involved in that. As well, there's a victim's family and there's a district attorney. And I remember the first time I went in there, the mother and the father was there. And they both said that, that you're a monster. You destroyed our life. Everything you did caused so much harm. And it was hard to swallow. It was hard to swallow that. And hearing that, I froze in the hearing. I didn't know what to say. So they denied me 5 years. But after 4 years, I put in a petition because I did more work, and then I went back early, a year early. And this time, my hearing, I went in there and I took it full accountability. I was like, yeah, I'm that monster. I did all that horrible things you said I did. Yeah, and they said, do you think you deserve to go home? I like, no, I don't. No, I don't deserve nothing. I made my choice, and I had to live with that for the rest of my life. And at the end of the hearing, the mom spoke up. She said, Key, she said, I forgive you. And like, I just broke down. I'm like, I can't believe she said that. Like how can, for a mother to say, I forgive you, that was hard. Then I know, so I was found suitable that day. They say, Mr. Lamb, we find you suitable for parole. And that was in 2015. And everybody like, oh yeah, you going home. But then people like, and I'm telling them like, I'm not going home. I'm not going straight. I'm not walking out those gates. And they say, what do you mean you're not walking out those gates? I say, for one, because I wasn't born in this country and I wasn't a citizen. My mom did not become a citizen before I turned 18. And because of my crime, I lost all my status. I lost my green card. I lost all my legal permanent resident status. And so what that meant was, instead of being released out the gate, I was handed over to immigration custody, where I stayed 5 months pending a deportation order. But because I came before there was a treaty between America and U.S. in 1995, they said anyone that came before 95 are not deportable. And so because of that MOU, I was released from immigration after 5 months. And then I remember when I got out the first day, because in immigration, we can't have no belts and no shoelaces. So the first thing I did was I put on my shoelaces and put on a belt. Then I remember I walked around with 2 big plastic bags in my hand. And I remember this elder African-American guy, he said, hey, you lost? I said, is it obvious? He said, yeah, it's very obvious. Like, you look, and then the first thing I asked him, like, hey, where's the payphone? And people like, he like, payphone? There's no payphone around there. Nobody uses a payphone. And then so he said, I think there's one over there. And I went over there. I remember I went out, I got close to it. And I said, oh, shoot, I got no change. Like, how else would you use a payphone without no change? And then I got up on it, and then I realized, like, it was super gross. It was, like, disgusting. It was hella nasty, and it stunk, too. And then I say, I got to use the phone. But then I looked down, like, the cord was cut. I'm like, oh, shoot, like, I can't call nobody. But then eventually I got a hold of my brother, and he picked me up. He actually flew from Florida, come pick me up. And we drove from Orange County all the way to Sacramento, where I got to spend the night at my grandmother's house. So that was so dope. And then I remember my brother asked me, like, what's the food you want to eat? And I said, pho. I want some pho. I ate some Vietnamese noodles. And it was the worst noodles I ever had in my life. So, but then I remember finally, to end it all, closing, is that my grandma and my family say, so what you gonna do for a living? And I said, I want to do reentry. They're like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, why would you want to do reentry? Like, you got all these skills. You can become a family therapist. You can become a plumber. You could become a carpenter. You could become a sheet metal worker. You could become a social worker. Why the hell you want to be a reentry coordinator? Like, that don't even pay much. I said, well, because I realized, like, if I had the support that I needed as a kid, I probably wouldn't be in jail. And so I want to give back. I want to make sure that somebody else don't end up in the same situation I did. All right, either their father, brother, mother, uncle, grandfather, like any generation. Like, I don't want that. I want people to find that healing for themselves. That way, they don't continue on and hurt each other and hurt our community. And so that's why I do what I do today. And so, and part of it is understand that criminalizing people is not a form of healing or solution, right? You think about it, locking people up is actually a mental health issue because people usually come out of prison worse than when they went in. It's almost like somebody that's getting out of the military. You see how bad that issue is. And so being in prison, we could talk about prison life. Me and Miguel could talk about that all day, about the trauma that's inflicted inside prison, not just by prisoner, but also by guards. So
the one I'm most curious about for Key is just like, what was your like mindset thinking like you'd be going back to a country that you really didn't even know from the first place? Like, did you even know like at that point like what you were even going to do if it ended up you going back to Vietnam?
So I thought about that because they asked me, one of the things they asked me in order for my release, they said, you have parole plans back to Vietnam. And then so I wrote to counselor and they said, we're not deporting you back to Vietnam. So I didn't need a parole plan. So, but just even that, when I went to immigration and I thought of the possibility of me being deported back to Vietnam, for one is I was scared out of my mind because I know anybody that's going back from the U.S. with my kind of sentence was either going to be murdered, put in jail. And so I realized, and the good thing is I had a lot of family support and friend support. So my plan was if they did deport me back to Vietnam, I made sure I got a ticket to get the hell out of Vietnam and go to another country nearby, right? Either to South Korea or to Singapore, anywhere, or Japan, because I was like, I'm not staying around. Plus my Vietnamese suck. So I want to make sure that I was gonna get out as quick as possible, right? And then one of the things I learned, like anybody that's being deported, is to not have no kind of value on you at all. No money, no good clothing. Like I was gonna wear nothing but sweats and a pair of flip-flops because as soon as they see me, that we don't want to rob him because the person that's gonna rob me was gonna be the police officers, law enforcement. So I made sure that I was gonna have nothing on me that they could take, right? And if they lock me up, they won't have nothing to take because I make sure I had nothing on me, no ID, no nothing. So yeah, I was super afraid because I knew if I go back, it could be life or death.
Just your mindset getting out of prison, like if there was even something that you had in mind, like initially what you want to do and like the process of getting there, like because I've heard so many stories of once you get out of prison, like it's kind of just like a wall, like there's really nothing for you to do or kind of like reach out to, like it takes like a lot of effort to kind of get rolling. So I just wanted to see your guys' take on that.
For me, I was very fortunate. I had a lot of, like one of the organizations that I work for now, Asian Prison Support Committee, they've been there from the inside out. They've been supporting me from the inside when I was at San Quentin. That's how I met them through a annual health fair that we had over there. One of the organization I helped co-found it. And so they said, hey, you come out, we're going to support you. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I remember when I got out and they said, hey, so we could give you a stipend to help out, to work with us, which was not much, right? It was a nonprofit. Nonprofits don't really make much money. So I remember when I got out, I was just busy. I was just like I was just putting myself everywhere, just making myself visible to everybody in the community, right? Marketing myself of all the skills that I have acquired since I was in there. Like I got different certification. I got paperwork to prove that I've been doing all these different kind of work. And so I had offers all right and left. Like at first, one of my buddies, he offered me 35, 75 an hour just to do some sheet metal work. Another buddy of mine offered me, you know, that's a union job. And the other guy offered me a plumbing job at 45, 25 an hour. So like I had super opportunities to do any kind of different thing with like major 401k packages, right? Healthcare and everything. But I turned it all down because I'm like, that's not what I want to do. Whereas the people, my clients that I work with, they don't have the same opportunities. Some are actually coming home homeless. And so one of the things that I do for them is that I make sure that they find, you know, some kind of housing to go to first. Because and I understand the first month is the most crucial before anybody could actually reoffend, right? To make sure that they are on some kind of solid ground. And so there are a lot of barriers, especially anyone that has any kind of felony. Like, you know, even misdemeanor is like super, I say, what's the word I'm trying to find, Miguel? It's a lot of resistance for anybody to have any kind of criminal history, because they clump everybody up with a criminal history like, oh, you're one of those people. Like, we can't trust you. Like, you can't do this. Because we work with, like, one of the agency told me, well, we work with people. Like, I'm like, what does that mean? Like, we not people? Like, we made some bad choices, but we still people. And so they clump us in this label as like, you guys are like you guys could never be redeemed. You guys never could change. You are the person you are. Like, imagine like one of the bad decisions you made in your life, and that'd be the person you are forever. Like, you got caught cheating on the test. So you're going to be a cheater for the rest of your life. And so that's the thing that society, I realize, is like really harmful in that sense. Like, some people just don't know how to see beyond the crime. All right. So.
Yeah. I mean, I like, I'm not doing policy anymore. I'm a program manager as of last week at the Hinza Collective. So I'm developing some of the programs at the CCWF, which is the women's prison in Chowchilla, California, and then in Soledad. But I'm still doing a lot of extra, policy work on the side around all kinds of issues. But I think in there's different. In prison, there's so many different populations that are getting out. You have the lifers that were sentenced to life, and on average, they've served 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 years. There's people that have served 45 years. So the challenges people face upon reentry are different and diverse because, it's different for me than what it is for somebody that's paroling that's 60 years old, that's have health issues, that has just pretty much situations where they can't work, where they might not be able to do the work that's available for them, outside of the challenges of being hired in the first place. So there's a lot of issues with reentry, housing, employment, based on so many things, including health and age. But for me, on a personal level, like when I was inside, and then expounding to what Julia had mentioned earlier in a little chat, and to credit Key Lam too, he's being a little modest, but when he talks about co-founding like programs and developing programs in prison, like that's what I was doing. I was involved in whether it was education. We ended up creating a program called Adult Peer Education Project with University of San Francisco, the professors, the dean. We convinced them to bring in people to teach us how to be teachers, with the idea that we were going to get out and be able to go to the university, go to school, right? Follow this as a career. And so we were doing co-teaching with professors and learning how to write curriculum, and created a pretty big program that's still running. And one of my friends, he's actually teaching, right? He actually pursued it, and he was the math teacher, right? But at the time, it was not a paid position; it's a volunteer position. But I was doing, I was organizing in there. I was doing like teacher education forums around school to prison pipeline, and I was inviting teachers from the Bay Area to come in and talk about these issues with the people on the inside that had experience with it. And I think Kilam was on one of those forums. just basically because he was also a mentor in a program called Squires, where they brought in youth to kind of learn from our experiences. It's not a Scared Straight program. I mean, but through that network, you know, in the unique position that I was in at the time, working in newspaper and being involved in the programs that I was in and creating programs for other people, you know, that's where I ended up getting a lot of my connections. So I kind of knew what I wanted to do when I got out, you know, but we do have challenges. And unfortunately, some of those challenges come from parole, the actual parole office, and the type of things they put in place for some of us. And that was a big challenge for me. But there is a lot of you know, there's the lack of resources, and it's not that there aren't people trying to provide resources, but I think incarceration in California is huge, right? It's been an issue for so long. And so it's not as simple as saying that, you know, we have challenges getting jobs. You know, California, what was it, 113,000 people that were incarcerated for a long time. That's a lot of people in one state. California currently is spending, what, $13.2 billion a year on incarceration alone. And that's the CDCR. That's not county jails. That's not everything else. That's the California Department of Corrections, $13.2 billion. So when we're talking about like some of the challenges, a lot of those challenges for me in the work that I was doing is the system itself. You know, $13.2 billion, and we can't manage to just find some sort of even basic housing sometimes for somebody. That's a systems problem to me, in my idea. But when I got out, I ain't gonna lie, I'll keep it real. I was working 2 jobs. I was working restaurant jobs, but I knew what I wanted to do, right? But again, you know, I was physically able to do those type of jobs. Like I didn't care. Like I needed to work, and that's what I was gonna do. But I knew what I wanted to do, and I wanted to get involved in policy work and advocacy work, and change the way the system works. But then again, I had the luxury of being in right places at the right time, and not everybody ever has that in prison. And a lot of people do get out, and it's unfortunate that a lot of times they say, well, you know, you're the problem, like you can't get a job. It's not that easy, because I know a lot of guys that come out and they struggle, and they were doing fine in prison, and they do have a lot of obstacles. Right here locally in Oakland, and this is not every county, but in Oakland, the city of Oakland, recently, thanks to somebody that was formerly incarcerated named John Jones, Oakland passed a resolution that they can't ask you about pretty much your background, your criminal background, when it comes to housing, when it comes to renting a house. So something small like that, like those are some of the barriers that are huge, whether somebody ends up homeless or not, or struggling or not, right? And so those are the type of things that are important when we're talking about these issues about challenges, is that we have to change really how city leaders, county leaders, and our state leaders think about how we provide services, and support people like King Lam and the organization that do that work. Nonprofit. They shouldn't be a nonprofit to have to do this work. The city, we're doing stuff that cities and counties should be doing, and providing effectively, and we're trying to provide it effectively as well.